What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Waste World Podcast. I'm your host, Gage Edwards, here with you again with some new content to kick us into the middle of January and lead us right through some events that I'm at currently. You're seeing this, so I'm recording this at home, but I am not at home. Trust me, I am out on the road, seeing the people, meeting the people, and figuring out what's going on in our industry. Speaking of what's going on in our industry, today's episode is going to be a big look into that. Looking at different utilizations of AI, a waste stream that I think is not enough or not talked about enough. And we're going to break that down as to why, the challenges because of it, and the solutions from it. So today we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence. AI continues to scale at an unprecedented pace. I don't know if you're a reader of Waste360.com, but I just wrote up an AI article about some of the findings from CES, which we talk a little bit about that in this episode, I believe. But AI, it's not just changing how we use technology, it's reshaping how infrastructure is built, how waste is tracked, how sustainability is measured. From hyperscale data centers to construction sites, new standards are emerging around materials, energy, and accountability. We're seeing these things pop up all the time, and that is what today's conversation is about. It's about what is coming next, why 2026 is a pivotal moment, and how waste, especially wood waste, is becoming a measurable strategic asset rather than an afterthought. Again, a waste stream that's not being talked about enough. But today we are talking about it plenty to kind of shine the proper light on what's going on in that side of things from a construction standpoint, and really just stop throwing away wood crates. I mean, come on, it's so easy. They're reusable for a while. They can be recycled into good stuff. Stop throwing them away. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you do, make sure you like the podcast, subscribe to it on your podcasting service of choice, and share it with a friend. They might appreciate this also. Anyway, enjoy the episode. My guest today is Todd Thomas, founder and CEO of Woodchuck, a climate tech company using AI to transform wood waste diversion and renewable energy production. Todd sits at the intersection of artificial intelligence, infrastructure, and sustainability, helping organizations turn waste into value while reducing costs and environmental impact. Todd is also a 3-time best-selling author and author of the newly released book, Hyperscale, AI, Data Centers, and the Next Great Expansion of Global Energy Capacity, which examines how the rapid growth of AI-driven data centers is reshaping energy systems, construction practices, and climate strategy. His work focuses on moving sustainability from compliance to competitive advantage and redefining what leadership looks like in a rapidly changing industrial landscape. Todd, thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us on the Waste World Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Of course. And reading through that, we've never had, that I know, a 3-time best-selling author on the show, or even someone who's recently released a book. So congratulations. Good on you.
Thanks so much. And I'll give you a real-time update. I just got an email from our publisher, Hyperscale, just hit #1 on Amazon. So #4.
So 4-time bestseller. Yeah, you're setting records right here on the Waste World Podcast. That is breaking news. There we go. All right, let's just kind of jump into things. I know that intro I read, sounds like you're doing a lot, and I think we're going to cover a lot today. So our listeners are in for a treat. So I'd like to know first a little bit more about you. So can you give us a quick introduction about yourself, what you do, and your work with Woodchuck?
Sure. So I've got kind of an eclectic background. I've been able to work in a bunch of different verticals, which has been really fun. I'd say the common thread has always been emerging technologies. What is the latest and greatest technologies, and how can we leverage that to drive efficiencies, improvements, new commercialization opportunities? And really the last 10 years, it's been AI and AI platforms. Woodchuck is the latest AI platform, the latest AI company that I've been fortunate enough to work with and launch. Woodchuck is really taking AI image recognition. So an AI technology that's pretty well used. It's a pretty mature technology. So we're taking that existing technology and applying it to waste management and material processing. So waste management and material processing is a pretty non-sexy vertical. that is pretty much devoid of technology and so really ripe for disruption. They've pretty much been doing things the same way for decades, and there is a great deal of opportunity for efficiency. So we built Woodchuck AI, which is an AI platform utilizing image recognition to identify waste materials, to identify contaminants within those waste streams, and then to segregate all of those out. So we can then really get the purest form of each material and use it to its highest best use. So typically when we go onto a construction site or to a manufacturing site, we want to separate out and divert all of the wood, cardboard, plastic, metal, sometimes cement, sometimes asphalt. We usually start with wood. There is a ton of wood waste in construction and in manufacturing, and wood is an amazing material. It can be used in so many different ways. And right now, the vast majority of it goes to landfills in both construction and manufacturing. You can think of, every time you go to the store and you drive on the backside of the store and you see those piles of pallets everywhere, that's really valuable, great material. And for the most part, it all ends up in the landfill. In fact, US landfills are 30 to 40% wood by volume. So not only are we wasting all of this wood, we're filling up our landfills with wood. And this is really great material. So Woodchuck wants to make sure that none of that stuff ends up in the landfill. We want to divert all of that wood and turn it into clean, renewable energy. We also want to recycle the cardboard, recycle the plastic, recycle the metal. And AI really allows us to kind of flip the script, right? Because most people think, oh, I want to do the sustainable thing, but how much is it going to cost me, right? Woodchuck uses AI to drive efficiencies that allows us to flip the script. So not only do you get to do the sustainable thing, but we will use it to reduce waste, reduce costs. So you're being sustainable, you're reducing carbon at the same time you're reducing your costs. So it's really a win-win. So that's what we're doing with Woodchuck, and we're still pretty new. We're just in our third year as a startup, but we've got a great client list and we've got some great momentum, and it's going really well.
Well, I think that was an amazing, totally encompassing answer. And I think everyone should be really involved now. It's like they understand what Woodchuck is and what you do. And I think one of the good points I always tell people about this podcast is the people I bring on, we're really uncovering things that you don't think about a lot in the waste industry. And in construction waste, wood waste is especially, I don't really hear anyone talking about. The conversations I have at conferences I go to or in my day-to-day, just trying to figure out who's doing what. No one's talking about construction and wood waste. Why is that so overlooked? It seems like an easy waste stream to take care of, or at least a opportunity to make some money with this, trying to recover these materials. What's happening there?
That's a great question. And it's really interesting because a lot of the big end clients, big tech companies, big automobile companies, they care a lot about sustainability, and they've made a bunch of public claims and public goals around sustainability. But for the most part, they talk about their production environment. So once their factories are built, or once their data center is built, how close to net zero can they operate that facility? And that's what they talk about and focus on. But nobody talks about the construction of the building itself. And there's a huge amount of waste. There's a huge amount of carbon that gets released and other greenhouse gases that get released during the construction of those buildings. So if we can shift a little bit of our focus or expand our focus and really look at the total life cycle of one of those facilities, so not just what's the sustainability of operating the building, but what did it take to get you there, right? How much carbon, how much waste was there in the building of that building? And what we see is typically, like, let's say for a data center, about 40% of the total carbon released over the life cycle of a data center happens during the construction stage. So It's not insignificant. It's a significant amount of that carbon. So if Woodchuck can come in and help with that, and we can make sure that wood, cardboard, plastic, metal, none of that ends up in the landfill, and instead we divert all of those materials, we can dramatically reduce the wood waste. We can dramatically reduce the carbon footprint and really improve the overall sustainable impact of that facility. And by diverting all of the wood and turning it into renewable energy, we can actually offset a small portion of the energy that the data center is going to use. So there's really kind of multiple levels of benefit of looking beyond just the production, but what does it take you to actually build that building first?
Gotcha. Now, I said what I said, and then you had your answer there. But of course, I imagine you talk about this stuff all the time, and you're always looking at infrastructure, AI, sustainability. I've gathered that, right? So, from your perspective, why does 2026 feel like such an important inflection point in those areas?
We are seeing a huge convergence right now of multiple segments that have always been separate, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you've got big tech companies that are building data centers at a rate that nobody's seen before. And kind of the history of data centers are you look for a location that has available energy to build your data center. And that's where data centers have been built. So cheap land, available energy, and you build that. But we're to the point in North America, in the United States, and really globally, where the grid, the energy infrastructure is maxed out. There is no excess capacity. We've got rolling blackouts in California and Texas and New York. The grid is maxed. So if you want to build a new data center, you cannot plan or locate places to tap into the existing grid. That those opportunities don't exist anymore. You need to bring your own energy to the table. So when you're talking about building a data center now, more and more data centers are looking at building their own on-site energy capacity. And that does a couple things. Number one, they have to have energy, so they have to build these energy capacities. But number two, one of the biggest hurdles to building a new data center today is public perception. Nobody wants a data center in their backyard because they hear these stories that, oh, they're going to use all the energy and our energy prices are going to go through the roof. And they're going to use all of our water. We're not going to have any water. So if a data center comes in and builds their own energy capacity and builds excess energy capacity, they can actually feed energy back into the grid and actually lower the energy costs for the local community. Well, first of all, that solves your energy problem. Second of all, it solves your huge public perception problem. So it's a really great strategy. And kind of the next layer of that is, what is the energy source, right? How sustainable is that energy source? And I think what we're seeing more and more of is data centers looking to a hybrid energy approach where they will look first to sustainable. So they'll put in a solar farm or a bioenergy facility or a wind farm. But wind and solar in particular are intermittent and require batteries to really make them an efficient system. Bioenergy is great because you can ramp up bioenergy up and down. So a lot of these kind of hybrid solutions will use multiple different energy sources. So they will build a solar farm as close to the facility as possible, and they'll use solar during the day. But at night, when the sun goes down, they can ramp up bioenergy or they can ramp up liquid natural gas. So by having multiple energy sources, they don't have to use a battery system, which saves a great deal of cost and allows them to use renewables as much as possible. So these solutions are much more attractive to local communities and solve the energy capacity. That's why I really believe that this massive surge in AI data centers is ultimately going to lead to a huge expansion in our total global energy capacity.
Mm. Yeah, and so we were covering a lot about the energy demand there with our AI data centers. That's usually the focus when people are talking about that. So if construction itself is about to come under scrutiny, so what's changing there? Is it a little bit of what you said, where they're trying to bring in their own source of energy? So we're talking about lower bills for people, so people have less focus on the energy demand with AI data centers?
Well, I think we're not going to get away from the scrutiny on the energy capacity and the energy consumption and how that AI data center either contributes to or consumes from the local grid. That's always going to be the first concern. But I do think there is growing awareness of the total life cycle of that facility and what it brings to the community and what it brings to the different entities involved. And certainly the construction of that building itself is a part of that. When you build a data center, let's say you're building a 2 million square foot, 1.5 gigawatt data center. That's a $5 to $10 billion project that could take 2 to 4 years to build. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to build a campus with multiple data centers on it, you might be on that campus, building that campus for 2 to 7 years. I mean, these are huge projects that take billions of dollars. So it is not insignificant. And what is the impact on the community during the process of building that? How much carbon is released during the process of constructing that facility? People are becoming more aware of that and want to do the right thing. And that's why I think people are starting to look more at the sustainability of the construction itself. How can we make better decisions in terms of the materials that we choose, the processes that we choose, and how can we make sure that we are doing a better job handling all of the waste? Because construction waste has been one of the biggest sources of waste in the United States and North America and the world forever, for decades. But by looking at that, a lot of these materials are really valuable and can be used for a second purpose. That is particularly true when we're talking about AI data centers. AI data centers or EV battery factories or solar farms, for that matter, produce a lot more waste than your traditional commercial construction. And that's because all of this high-tech equipment, servers, EV battery equipment, solar panels, when they arrive on site, they arrive in six-sided hardwood custom pallets. And inside that pallet is a ton of cardboard and a ton of plastic protecting the IT asset that's inside of there. Right now, almost all of that material goes to the landfill, but all of that material is really valuable. The wood, the cardboard, the plastic. So at Woodchuck, our goal is really to make sure that none of that packaging material, none of that dunnage material ends up in landfills, that we reuse, divert, and recycle all of it for its highest, best use. And that can make a meaningful impact. I am glad to see that the focus is expanding beyond production into the construction itself. So certainly the energy consumption of these data centers is always going to be first and foremost, but we can also make a positive impact on how we actually build the centers and what we do with the waste while we build them.
Gotcha. Now, talking about the construction, talking about those job sites. So waste is really becoming measurable for those job sites. We're in the early stages of that happening at all. So what does that actually look like in practice? Why hasn't it happened before? Can we thank AI for this? Is that making this job a lot easier for us?
So traditionally in construction, your waste handling, it's a cost of doing business. You have to
Sure.
do it. Of course, you're going to have waste and you've got to haul it off site. But it's a pretty small line item. If you're building a $1 billion data center, your waste hauling cost is like 1, maybe 2% of your total budget. It's tiny. So it's not a big priority. People don't look at it a lot. And so you just haul your waste away. So if you think about it, everybody's familiar with, dump trucks and those big 40-yard dumpsters, right? Those big
Mhm.
steel boxes that everybody throws everything into. That's the way waste has been hauled off for decades on construction sites.
Yeah.
The challenge there is, of course, it's an expensive way to haul stuff off. And once everything gets thrown into that dumpster, get together and commingled, it's really difficult to separate those materials afterwards. There have been lots of companies that have tried to separate waste after the fact. And you have these big MRF facilities all over the place that try to separate all the materials that are brought into them. The ugly truth is a really good MRF might get a 9% yield, meaning the majority of the materials that are going to those MRFs is still ended up in the landfill.
Yeah. I was going to say that sounds like a major pain.
It is. It's a nightmare. It doesn't work. It's not efficient. It's expensive. And yes, AI really does help with that. So
Mhm.
Woodchuck takes a pretty different approach. We use AI to help us pre-sort those materials. So when we go to a job site, we don't put one 40-yard dumpster. We put a whole series of dumpsters. We put one for wood, one for cardboard, one for plastic, one for metal. In fact, often there'll be multiple for plastic because multiple different types of plastic.
Yeah.
If you commingle the plastic, it all ends up in the trash. But if we can separate those different types of plastic, they all have different values and different purposes. So we want to separate as many of those materials as possible so that we can maximize the next use of those materials. And AI helps us because it helps us identify, are we putting the right material in the right bin? It identifies if you put anything in the wood container that isn't wood, it identifies it immediately so we can get it removed.
Mm.
Then as you further process that wood, if you're trying to take that wood, so it's now construction wood waste, and we haul it off site and we start to process it, we can continue to use the AI to identify contaminants in that wood to help us get that. The end result is biomass. The processed construction wood waste then becomes biomass. And as we're processing it, we use AI to identify contaminants within the process to maximize the resulting quality of the biomass. There are things like fire retardants and preservatives and other chemicals that often get put into wood that the human eye just can't see. But AI can be trained to recognize that. So if we've got a big lot of wood that has been addressed with fire retardant or preservatives, we can identify that and process that differently because you can't use that for energy production. You can't use all of those chemicals in energy production, but you can use it for other industrial uses. So you can still find a second use for that wood, but you can't use it in energy production. And AI helps us to make sure that we're processing each lot of wood as best possible to get it as clean as possible for its best, highest use. But we're going to use it all. We're going to find a purpose for all of it. And so AI really drives efficiencies and makes that work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something I definitely would like to see more on construction sites. Not that I'm going to construction sites all the time, but like more of these dumpsters. You're seeing one. I remember helping friends, tear apart a house or something, and it's like, we just have one big dumpster. I'm like, there's a lot of materials here. We got to do better than this, and also having the backing of AI to make sure that people are throwing stuff in the right dumpsters is the next step. But I think that makes that in my mind puts together, like, this is obviously the thing we should be doing. Why aren't we doing more of this? Why is this a new thing? It should be an all the time thing, I guess. Who knows?
Honestly, I get that question all the time. Why isn't somebody already doing this? Great question. I don't know.
Question.
No, and probably just because it's been too low of a priority. Mm-hmm. But it works, and AI makes it work. So now when we work with a construction company and we go to a new construction site, we're gonna separate and we're gonna divert all of those materials. And then we use the Woodchuck AI platform to track all of that. So we can provide really granular reports at the end of each week or each month to our clients that tell them exactly where did all these materials go, how much of it was diverted. We can tell them how much wood was diverted, cardboard, plastic, metal, how much CO2 was diverted. And we also track the CO2 from transportation and processing. So we can give them the net CO2 diverted number, which is really valuable. We can tell them how many megawatts of clean energy was produced from their wood. And these reports are really valuable to the client, but also to their end client. If you're building the data center for Amazon or Google or Meta or OpenAI or XAI, that information is really valuable to them. So there's a big attraction in that. And the other piece of it is because we're diverting all of those materials, we help to monetize those materials. So when we take that wood waste and we turn it into biomass, we can sell that biomass to a clean energy producer. When we recycle the cardboard and the plastic, we can get recycling rebates back from local recyclers. And then we can do a revenue share with the contractor and with the owner of the end facility and really provide a nice cost reduction. So I say, in general, when we work on one of these projects, we'll reduce waste hauling costs by 30% or more. And again, waste hauling cost is a cost of doing business. So if you can save them 30%, that goes straight to the bottom line. That's pure profit. And even though it's a small percentage of the total cost of one of these projects, if you're building $1 billion data center, 1% is still a really big number. You're saving these guys millions of dollars. And $1 million on a percentage basis of $1 billion project is small, but $1 million is $1 million,
Yeah. And that's kind of where I see the needle being moved. It's like when these companies figure like, oh, I could save all this money. Yeah, we'll go that route because our margins already super razor sharp thin. So let's save some money here and there. All right, let's shift gears and talk to me about zero wood waste. This is the first time I've heard of zero wood waste working here. What do you got for me?
So again, I think that's an area where people are starting to pay more attention just to the value of wood. It just doesn't make any sense to throw wood in a landfill. When you put wood in a landfill, it just continues to break down and releases CO2 and provides no value. But wood is so versatile. I mean, you can turn it into energy. You can actually put it through pyrolysis and turn it into liquid energy source or liquid oil. You can turn it into biochar. You can turn it into all sorts of different industrial products. It can be solidifier. It can be toppers. It's a really valuable material. In fact, if you can get it clean enough, you can use it for remanufacturing. So you can actually take construction wood waste, and if you process it really well and get it really clean, you can remanufacture it into particle board or press board, and it can go into new construction or new furniture. So wood is incredibly valuable, incredibly flexible, and it's such a waste to just throw it into a landfill
Right.
where it only causes harm. I think there's a growing I guess awareness of the value of wood, the flexibility of wood, and how easy it is to bring new value from that material.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking like it takes a long time to grow trees. What are we doing?
It does.
Let's use what we have. Why are we don't have infinite of these? Like we will run out. All right.
Well, and it's interesting when you talk about like people that grow trees, right?
Mhm.
Forestry and all of a sudden that connect with lumber companies and paper companies. Those guys are really aware of the amount of wood that they can yield from those
Mhm.
trees, and they do a good job of sustainably growing their trees over years. So they're planting trees and they're growing them for decades, and they're harvesting them appropriately and sustainably, and they're getting as much as they can out of that wood. So Universal Forest Products is a great example, right? They're harvesting trees at an appropriate time in an appropriate way so that they're continuing to grow this forest. And then they're going to get as much lumber as they can out of that tree. And then there's some wood left over that isn't good enough to go into lumber. So they make pallets out of it. And then after you make pallets, there's still wood left over. And so they still have some waste. So what do they do with that waste? And that's where they're working with Woodchuck to make sure that none of that waste ends up in the landfill. So they're really making sure that when they harvest that tree, they get the best and highest use out of every piece of that tree. So there really is no waste.
Mm.
Um, the blind spot is wood pallets, right? So if they make a wood pallet, everything that goes anywhere in the United States comes and goes on a pallet. So everybody has pallet waste. If you're in construction or you're in manufacturing or you're a retail store, everything comes and goes on a pallet. And for the most part, once you have that pallet, theoretically, they're multi-use. You can use a
Yep.
pallet multiple times. Nobody does. It arrives and then you throw it out back in the dumpsters and it ends up in the landfill. And that's just such a waste because most of those pallets are good, clean wood. They got a couple staples or a couple nails that can be easily removed. And that wood can be repurposed for all sorts of different purposes. So, wood pallets is just a huge blind spot. And I love wood pallets and I want all of them. I want to make sure none of them end up in a landfill and Woodchuck will turn them all into something really valuable and wonderful.
Well, that is good because I think lifetime for me, I've only ever seen wood pallets thrown away and thrown
Yeah.
away quickly, like one use and they're gone. And not even if they're broken, they're just like, yeah, we just don't need it anymore. I'm like, that seems like a huge waste to me.
Yeah, right.
Okay, let's talk about sustainability a little bit because sustainability is we're shifting from compliance only to competitive advantage. Where are you seeing that play out the most in the private sector?
So I think that comes back to, one of the things we talked about early on in this conversation that sustainability for decades, people have viewed it as, yeah, we would like to do the right thing. And it's just too expensive.
Mhm.
Um, But when you start to talk about waste handling, and of course, these new technologies like AI can help us drive more efficiencies in how we handle our waste. And so sustainability can now be a cost reducer, right? So when we work with a construction company and we can reduce their waste hauling cost by 30%, and in the process of doing that, we are diverting their wood, recycling their recyclables, and reducing their carbon footprint, that's a win-win. It's a part of our, I guess, one of the principles of Woodchuck is for something to be truly sustainable, it can't just be environmentally sustainable. It has to be financially sustainable. If it's not financially sustainable, by definition, it's not sustainable, right? So if we can use new emerging technologies, if we can use AI, we can use image recognition to drive efficiencies and reduce waste and reduce costs, well, that's a win-win. Then when you go and talk to a commercial company, whether it's a manufacturing company, retail company, construction company, and we can tell them, look, we can reduce your carbon footprint and we can reduce your costs. So the sustainability team loves the CO2 reduction. The operations or the production team loves the cost savings, and the end client loves it all. So it's really a win-win, and I'm glad that there's growing awareness of that.
Yeah, and I guess as when we're talking sustainability and AI and data becoming more central to it, how are companies avoiding turning this into more greenwashing for themselves?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, there is a lot of greenwashing that's going out there, but I think. Honestly, media has done a good job of holding people to account on that.
We're
And
trying. We're trying.
yeah, so good on you, Gage. Yeah.
Thank you.
But the reality is there are realistic, attainable ways of making real impacts. And part of what Woodchuck, what we try to bring to the table is, yes, we're going to divert your wood, but we're also going to track all of that for you, and we're going to report on it, and we're going to validate all of that for you. So if you're a big construction company and you're serving one of these big tech companies, we're going to give you a really detailed report and tell you exactly how much material was diverted, and we will validate that for you and where it ends up. One of the big problems is, or has been in the past, if you're working with one of these major waste haulers, right? They all have transfer centers where they bring all this material and they bring it to a transfer center. And then some portion evidently gets recycled and some portion goes to the landfill. But a transfer center is just a big black box and nobody tracks anything coming or going from there. So you don't know. Like in your neighborhood, Gage, you probably have like two different containers outside your house, right? One for trash and one for recycling.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So that recycling container, when your local company comes and picks it up every week and hauls it away, do you have any idea how much of that material actually gets recycled and how much ends up in the landfill?
I haven't stopped to talk to them. They actually collect my stuff at 2 a.m. So you know what? I'll have to stay up one night. I see them on my Ring camera. I'm like, why are they at 2 a.m.? What are we doing? I don't live in a bustling city, but you know what? I don't know. So that's something I should be looking into.
But most people don't know. And the reality is most of that material is going to go to a transfer station or it's going to go to a MRF. And the ugly truth is the reality of that's or the majority of it's going to end up in a landfill.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the values that Woodchuck brings is not only are we going to make sure that these materials actually get diverted and don't end up in a landfill, we will validate exactly the endpoint of all of these materials and give you a very detailed report telling you exactly where your materials ended up and the positive outcome that each of those had. And I'd say from a sustainability view, that is as much value as the diversion itself, being able to really confirm and validate that has in fact happened.
Right. Yeah. It's shifting worlds all the time. Crazy. A lot going on. So, but I want to shift gears a little bit there. Your new book, Hyperscale, right? Just released, available on Amazon. Quick plug for everybody listening. I had it in one of my tabs. I don't know where it went. Is it this one? No, that's something else. I have to order. Another thing. My computer's being weird over here. So in the press release I was reading, I haven't had a chance to get my hands on a copy. You argue that data centers are no longer passive energy consumers, right? So what does that mean for a data center to become active infrastructure?
So we kind of talked about that a little bit earlier on, but essentially data centers in the past have been a node on the grid that simply consumes energy, right? So whatever their energy requirements are, they're sucking that energy off of the grid. But the growing trend is data centers that are producing their own power, both renewable and non-renewable. More and more, we're seeing hybrid solutions where they're using renewables and augmenting that with other sources to make sure they have the energy capacity they need. But in many cases, they are producing excess capacity and feeding that back to the grid. So they're not simply consuming energy during times of the day when they're producing more energy than they're consuming. They can push that back to the grid, which can have a positive impact on the total energy capacity of the community and can potentially lower power costs for the local community. So it can be a really positive thing. And I think we're seeing that more and more.
Yeah, I have to reach out. That's another thing. I need to make a list. You're reminding me because there was a data center that went up near me, and my energy bill did go up recently. So I need to figure out what they're doing, I'm gonna have them call you so they can figure it out over there, so I can get a lower energy bill on my side. Okay, biggest thing most people in waste, recycling, and construction aren't paying attention to yet is what?
Honestly, the biggest problem most of the time when we go and look at a new project, we will ask the construction company, how much waste do you expect from this project? And the most common answer we get is a lot.
Sure.
They don't know. They don't know how much trash they're going to have. They don't know how much waste there's going to be. They've been using the same waste hauling companies for decades, and they've got a time and material contract, and they pay by the load, and it's a small percentage of the total budget, and so they just the trash gets hauled away and they don't have to worry about it. Um, so to be able to come into one of these projects and actually start to track all of this waste and quantify it for people, and quantify not just the total waste, but quantify it by material streams, can really open people's eyes to the value of all of these material streams. And a big part of that is, again, we mentioned it a little bit earlier, but when you're building an AI data center or an EV battery factor or a solar farm, they produce a lot more waste than people think about. I would say most construction companies are underestimating the total waste because they don't think about all of that packaging waste that's coming with this high-tech equipment. It's a massive amount of waste. More waste. In many cases, it's more than doubling the total waste from a single project. So it's becoming a bigger issue. It's becoming more costly for them. So if you can actually, pay a little bit more attention to that and start to track it and quantify how much waste there is, and not just how much waste there is, but how much of it can be diverted and no longer be waste, but be converted into a monetizable, material. So wood does not have to be waste. It can be converted into many different materials. Cardboard, great example, right? Loose cardboard on its own, if you just take a broken down box and throw it in a dumpster, that's trash and it has value. But if you can collect all of that cardboard and bale it into a big 1,000-pound bale of cardboard, well, that's actually a material that can be bought and sold on a commodity market. It has value. So instead of just throwing loose cardboard into the dumpster, if you collect that and bale it, you now have a monetizable asset. Same thing is true of plastic. Separate your different plastics, bale them. You now have a monetizable asset. As you grind up all of those pallets and you run all of that wood over a magnet and you pull out all of those staples and bolts and nails, well, now you've got a big bucket of metal that is recyclable and monetizable. So all of these materials thrown together as they are trash. You separate them out and they are monetizable materials. They become commodities and you can monetize them, and that dramatically reduces your cost. So instead of paying someone to haul all of these materials to a dump yard, you're separating them and you're selling them. You're really flipping the script on the economics of this material. And as we're building more and more of these projects that have a growing amount of waste from the packaging, it becomes a bigger issue and a bigger opportunity to save more money. And again, like we talked about, as soon as everybody loves sustainability, but when you can combine that with cost savings, okay, now you got a winner.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I think, throughout my whole life, I've always heard the phrase, you're throwing money away. And I feel like in this industry, it is literally happening because people don't want to either put in the cost to make something out of it or take the extra steps to really do something with their waste. And they're literally just throwing money away. And we need more proactive voices like yourself to kind of get there and be like, what are you guys doing? This is good stuff you have here. This is a commodity. What you're just literally thousands, millions of dollars you're sending to landfills. Let's do something. Let's change it up. So I think that is a good takeaway. And I just reminded myself, like, oh, people say my collectibles, I'm throwing away money. I'm like, well, listen, who really is throwing away money? All these correct construction sites. Okay.
Kind of an interesting new thing. More people are starting to talk about mining landfills, right? We have all this stuff we've been throwing away for decades, and all these materials like metals and cell phones and laptops and wood and copper fittings and copper pipes, all this stuff, copper wiring, it's in these landfills. And so now people are trying to figure out an economical way to actually mine landfills and extract all of this material. So we're at that point where all of these materials have so much value that we're actually considering opening up landfills and mining that. Like, can you think of a more disgusting, terrible job than mining a landfill?
Well, luckily we'll have, hopefully AI robots can do the dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs of going through the landfills and figuring it out. But then we're going to see numbers come out like, hey, you know how much money they made off that landfill? And someone's going to be like, holy shit, we threw that away.
Right. So if instead of sending stuff to the landfill and ultimately mining it later, let's extract that value right now. Let's not send it to the landfill. Let's separate these materials and let's get value out of them right now today and never send them to the landfill.
Hey, perfect world. Let's Hope for the best. So let's take a second and talk to the waste and recycling professionals who are listening to this show. So in your opinion, what should they be doing now to get ready for what's coming in 2026 and beyond? More separation at the construction sites, more, end of life plans for their waste. What are you thinking?
More conversations with their contractors about the waste streams and the materials that they have on each job site and what are the potential endpoints for all of that material. Because the material is different for every job site. I mean, everybody has wood, cardboard, plastic, but some have a lot of metal, some have very little, some have cement, some don't, some have asphalt, some don't. But have those conversations with the contractor and put together a waste management plan that's going to address all of those materials and get the highest, best use for each of those materials. And don't simply take it to the landfill. Let's find a better use for it, because there are better uses. And by finding that better use, we can drive cost savings for everybody in that ecosystem.
Yeah, make that money. I almost wonder if Captain Planet's message was to make money. We would have better recyclers now. I don't know. All right. Well, Todd, that is the end of my questions. I would like to ask you if there's anything we didn't cover today that you want to go over real quick with me, something that maybe I didn't cover.
Well, I think we covered a lot of material. Those were great questions, and I appreciate the conversation, and I really appreciate you having me on. Always happy to talk about Chuck, and always happy to talk about trash. We're trying to make trash sexy.
Yeah, I don't anticipate this being our last conversation about this topic. So, Todd, I thank you for being here. Where can people find more about you and what you're doing?
Check us out at woodchuck.ai. Come and check it out, see what we're doing. And if you've got a big project coming up, give us a call. We'd love to help out.
Excellent. Well, Todd, thank you for joining me. Everybody, thank you for listening. Make sure you check out Todd and the work he's doing. And then check out his book. His book's available on Amazon, right?
Yes, it is. Check it out. Hyperscale.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
Okay, that wraps up today's episode of the Waste World Podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Todd for joining us, talking about AI, data, infrastructure, all of that. It continues to converge. And, from this conversation today and our findings in the industry, it's clear that waste tracking, material accountability, and private sector leadership is going to play a growing role in how sustainability is defined, measured, and how it moves forward. I don't want to toot my own horn too much, but conversations like this, podcasts like this, we highlight why the next phase of climate progress may come less from a regulation standpoint and more from visibility, economics, and innovation. So, again, a key takeaway today is save some money or make some money from saving that wood waste. You know what I'm talking about? Think about it. Think about your bottom line. Think of that top dollar. I'm not a businessman. I assume those got to be the same things. Top dollar, you want to make. Bottom line, you want to be better. Look, they don't trust me with the money around here. All right. Anyway, if you enjoyed this episode of the Waste World Podcast, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your podcasting service of choice. We're on Spotify, Apple iTunes, all the other podcasting services. Those are the two I use, but I know we're on more. Rate us, leave a review. 5 stars would be great. Let us know what you think. Share us with a friend. Check out the YouTube version of the episode where you can see my beautiful face and our guest each week. And for more coverage on waste, recycling, and sustainability, visit waste360.com. Thank you for listening.